Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here. Thank you all for coming to participate in this session. My name is Abby Sweeney. I am a senior program manager in Teams Engineering. And essentially what that means is I work with health and life science customers across the US to help sort of drive adoption with Teams, and then also bringing feedback into the engineering team to help make our features and our product better. So I'm based on the West Coast of the US, and then I'm very excited to have Grayson here, who is my counterpart on the East. Grayson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think you said it well. I'm Abby's counterpart here on the East Coast, also working to help support our strategic healthcare and life science customers. Very excited to go over some premium features here today and hopefully help you kind of ideate on how you can use that in your organization to get more. Thanks. Back to you,
Thanks,
Abby.
Grayson. Cool. So Grayson and I are going to be jumping back and forth a little bit between the different features that we've got within the Teams Premium. As Sarah mentioned, feel free to ask questions in the chat whenever you want. Grayson will be replying whilst I'm speaking and vice versa when he's speaking. If he wants to reply in the chat, he will. Otherwise, I can reply over the mic. And just a reminder that the recording will be uploaded to the Health and Life Sciences blog after this. So you don't need to request access to that at all. Okay, so let's jump into the content. As Sarah mentioned, this is a pretty long session, so please stick with us. Hopefully we'll make it exciting and you won't get too overwhelmed because there is a lot of features. So maybe if you can give me a little thumbs up with the react button or a heart or whatever reaction you want. Who's heard of Teams Premium? Who's already looked into it? Who's maybe already got licenses? Cool, awesome. Okay, so a lot of hands, a lot of thumbs up. Perfect, great. Okay, so I assume there's some people who may not know what Teams Premium is, but it seems like a lot of you already have some idea, which is great. So Teams Premium is a SKU that we released around about February time. Some of the features had already been within the Teams sort of client prior to that, but they all rolled up into this one Teams Premium SKU. This is kind of an overview of all of the different features that is included within the Teams Premium SKU. And there are four main pillars. So you can see protected, personalized, intelligent, and advanced meeting types. We're going to go through each of these pillars and every single feature within this slide, and we'll show you sort of how to turn them on from an admin standpoint and what the user experience is like and when you should be using them. With the Teams Premium SKU, it is an additional license, but we don't require every single user to have this license. You know, this isn't something that we say, you know, every 100,000 person in your organization should have this license. This is for those really refined scenarios that we'll go through, and ones where you really think, okay, yeah, maybe I need X, Y, and Z feature. We'll give this license to this person. Everything that we speak about has either already rolled out or will be rolled out by the end of this quarter. Our quarter ends at the end of June. So if it hasn't already been rolled out into the Teams client, you'll see it by the end of June. So I'm first going to jump into the protected pillar of Teams Premium. And the first thing that jumps here is end-to-end encryption. So as you probably are already aware, Teams meetings, Teams calls are already encrypted by our industry standards. But what this end-to-end encryption is an additional layer for those really, really secure sort of meetings and information that you don't, that you maybe want an extra layer of protection to. When we think of scenarios for end-to-end meetings, the main things that are included are just kind of audio and video. You can see in this sort of bottom couple of bullet points that there are a couple of stuff that are disabled within a regular Teams meeting if we've got end-to-end encryption enabled. So you're not able to record, use transcription, you're not able to use together mode or the large gallery from a viewing standpoint. You can't use large meetings, so that means that you can only have up to 50 people in that meeting. And any PSTN scenario is not available with an end-to-end encryption is enabled. As I mentioned, if you don't enable end-to-end encryption, Teams will still secure that meeting using the encryption based on the industry standards that we already have. The data exchange during meetings is always secure whilst in transit and at rest. But this is sort of an extra layer of encryption from the point that the data or the sort of voice or visual is initiated to the point that it's then given off at the other end. So what this looks like from a user standpoint. So at the top left-hand corner, if you all take a look in your Teams meeting client that we're using at the moment, in the top left-hand corner, we have this little shield. And if you hover over the shield, it says encryption status. And if you click it, it will tell you that the meeting is secured by Teams data encryption. If you enable the end-to-end encryption, when you click on that shield, you'll see this sort of pop out or pop down. This shows you the end-to-end encryption code and verifies that you have got the end-to-end encryption enabled there. As you can see, everything else in the Teams meeting is exactly the same, except for if you try and record or use transcription under the 3 dots, you won't be able to do that. Another way that you'll be able to see that the encryption is enabled is this little pop-up that we always get. So you probably got it when Jonathan started the recording in this meeting. You get it when someone starts transcription. You know, any sort of meeting information that changes, you'll get a little pop-up. So here we can also see that the end-to-end encryption has been updated. And then the other area that you're able to see the encryption and encryption code is under more. And if you go into the meeting info, you'll also see the encryption code there. So a couple of different areas. Again, this isn't intended for every single meeting. For example, if we were in this meeting here, we wouldn't be able to encrypt it because we have over, or use end-to-end encryption because we have over 50 people. So there's just, you know, very sort of refined scenarios that would require it. Okay, moving through the protected column into watermarking. So watermarking is something that was a big customer ask for Teams and for Microsoft. Watermarking, again, is for those meetings where you want to make sure that no information will get out of that meeting. People are discouraged to take screenshots or screen snips or share that information. Often you can have sort of security within meetings, within emails, which will stop you from being able to screenshot or screen grab, but it doesn't stop a user from grabbing their cell phone, grabbing a camera and taking a photo of that screen. But watermarking does, and I'll show you kind of a screenshot of what the watermarking looks like in a second. It works across all of our different platforms. So whether you're on a desktop, whether you're on a mobile, whatever sort of model that mobile or desktop is, it will work. The only sort of caveat with the watermarking is a couple of things are disabled. You can share a PowerPoint, but you can't share it through PowerPoint Live. You can just share your PowerPoint app. And then the recording and large gathering together mode are also not able to be used. Recording is pretty obvious because, you know, if you have watermarking on it, kind of means that you don't want anything shared or sort of recorded or screen grabbed. So that is not available. If I now pop into what this looks like, so you can see here that this is a Teams meeting. Again, looks pretty familiar to you, except for on the content, you can see that we have an alias here or an email. So you can see that across the content. You can also see it across the video streams. It's very faint, so it shouldn't take away from the content or the videos that are being shared, but it is sort of bold enough that you can still see it. What this is it is the identity of the user who is viewing this content. So for example, if Grayson is sharing his screen and we have watermarking enabled, I will view the content and it will have my identity on it. If Sarah is viewing the same content, it will have her identity on it. And the reason behind that is because if someone screenshots or if they take a photo with their cell phone, we'll be able to see, okay, it was Abby who took this photo, it was Abby who shared this photo, for example. So that's kind of what it looks like from a desktop content sharing purpose. This is kind of a video only view. You can see again very lightly that we can see the identity, and again you'll see the pop-up that tells you that the watermarking is active. And again across the different users here as well. Where you turn this on is within meeting options. So if you go to the top of your meeting that we're currently in and hit the more, or if you've organized the meeting, you'll see the meeting options within there. That's where you're able to enable recording, you're able to enable cameras, block microphones, whatever it is. In there, you're able to turn on the watermarking if it's allowed within your organization. Lastly, with the watermarking, you can see from a mobile view what this looks like. So exactly the same from a mobile view across the content and across the videos as well. The one sort of, I guess, caveat with mobile is if you are joining through VDI, PSTN, whatever, you'll just, of course, get audio only. We don't have that availability for the watermarking in VDI web just yet, but it should be coming relatively soon. So that is kind of what the watermarking looks like. One sort of mini feature that I will show you is changing recordings. So this is the meeting options that I just spoke about. If you have organized the meeting, you have the option to change a lot of different information with that meeting. One of the things that is included within the premium SKU is changing who can record. So that can be either organizers and co-organizers or organizers and presenters. So for example, if Sarah, Jonathan and Jonathan are organisers and co-organisers. If that was sort of changed to them, only they would be able to record. If it was organisers and presenters, Grace and I would also be able to record. So just a very small kind of feature there that we've also added. Okay, so the last part, or the last feature as part of the protected pillar, is sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels are probably not new to anyone who has been using Outlook and other M365 products. However, we've now pulled them across to Teams as well. So we have different sensitivity labels that can be changed or customized to your organization. With those sensitivity labels, this also changes the meeting options. So for example, if you set a sensitivity label, you can customize it to say only people in your organization can bypass the lobby, only organizers can record automatically. It will always end-to-end encrypt if it's a highly confidential meeting. It just depends on how you kind of customize it to your organization. And the kind of change as to where this policy is set up is actually in the Security and Compliance Center rather than the Teams Admin Center. So in here is where you set up your sensitivity label. So you can see here that we're setting a highly confidential / internal only one. The display name is the same, and then you can kind of explain what it is, what it looks like, and set your parameters to it. Once that has been set in the admin center, you can then see it in your meeting options. So again, if you go to create a meeting, or if you have already created a meeting and you want to apply a sensitivity label, you come into the meeting options and you can see the sensitivity here. Once you do click that sensitivity label, you should be aware that it will lock certain features within the options. So for example, if I hit the highly confidential and that highly confidential requires that no one can bypass the lobby, that will automatically happen and you cannot change it. And I'll show you what that looks like from a user experience in a second. So if I click highly confidential in my meeting options, if we then come into the meeting, again, in that same area that you can see the end-to-end encryption code under the little shield, you'll be able to see the meeting sensitivity. You can also see it in the title up here. You can see highly confidential and internal only, and you'll also see it in the meeting info. Once that has been set, all users will have the note that things will be locked. X, Y, and Z has already been turned on automatically. So whether that's watermark, whether that's end-to-end encryption, whatever it is. But you can see here, once you come into the meeting options within the meeting as well, there's a little lock by the bypass the lobby, meaning that that has locked due to the sensitivity label. You cannot change that in the meeting. Again, with the when you change anything to do with the protection of the meeting, it will come up in a pop-up for the meeting as well. So the same place that we had the end-to-end encryption and the watermark notification, will also see this in the sensitivity label here. This does carry back and forth between Outlook and Teams. So if you set a meeting, or if you create a meeting in Teams that is highly confidential sensitivity label, you'll be able to see that in Outlook and vice versa. So your users will be able to sort of see that prior to coming into the meeting. Cool, so that is the protected sort of vertical. I'll now pass it over to Grayson, who's going to take you through personalized.
Okie dokie. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and grab control here and then move on to slide 28. I believe I've done that. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the Teams Admin Center experience. Is that showing up for everyone? Great. Okay, I see some thumbs up. All right. Cool. So just kind of continuing the conversation that Abby just had on sensitivity labels, we're going
think we might have lost him, Abby.
Requires your IT admin actually go out of their way to.
Sorry, Grace, we just lost you for the start of that. Would you mind just starting again for the slide, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know. My apologies. My internet must have dropped for a second. Yeah, I was just saying that what we're showing you here is related to IT admins. So if you're an IT admin, this will be relevant to you. And if you're not, then just be aware that the settings, the options we're showing here do require that your IT admins go out of their way to set those up for you. So if you don't see these, even after you have premium, it's likely just because your IT admins haven't defined these options for you yet. So with that in mind, what we're showing here is a couple things. So one, what Abby just described, all the stuff on sensitivity labels, and also the ability to create and set default meeting options inside of a meeting template. So before we talk about customized meeting templates, we should probably talk about what a meeting template is to begin with. If you go into your Teams clients and you go to your calendar today, and then you click the drop down next to meeting, you'll see a few different options, right? So you'll see meeting first off, but you'll also see webinar, for example, right? Or maybe live events if live events are enabled in your environment. We consider those to be out-of-the-box templates, right? And essentially what they do is they create certain sets of meeting combinations with certain meeting options and defaults that give you a out-of-the-box experience that tries to give you, whatever you're looking for in a particular use case. So if you wanted a regular meeting, obviously you just create meeting. But if you're looking to create a webinar with associated defaults for who's a presenter and who's an attendee, and you want to have a registration page for it and all that stuff, then obviously you click webinar, right? So that's our concept of templates. So what we're talking about here is the ability to create specific customized templates that you can then publish to your end users. So an example I often use here is HR, right? Maybe HR has a certain type of meeting on a regular basis that you want to ensure out of the box by default has a certain set of meeting options applied to it. This would let you create those and then publish that to those end users such that they would see that option in their list of meeting types, which we'll show you here in a minute. So what you see here is us creating that custom meeting templates. And then what you're able to do after that is actually assign it to end users, right? So you can either assign it directly to a user or multiple users. Obviously, in an enterprise environment, that's going to be challenging to do at scale. So what you can also do here is you can create a group or use an existing group, and you can assign it to that group as well. So again, back to my HR example, if you have your entire HR group within a security group or a distribution group or whatnot, then you can simply select that group and that policy will apply to them. And then from there, if that group of users actually goes into their Teams clients and they click that drop down that I mentioned earlier here on the top right, they will actually see whatever custom templates you've published to them. So they'll be able to create meetings with the default policy settings, the default meeting options that you've defined up to that point in the Teams Admin Center. In terms of scheduling experience, it's still a Teams meeting right under the hood. So what you see here is us, creating a custom meeting using one of those custom templates. You'll see that these default settings here on the right, let me grab my laser pointer to point these out. These settings here on the right, the options, right, are set by default to whatever you've previously defined in that meeting template, but end users can change those as they see fit, right? So this just gives you that out of the box kind of default experience. All right, go ahead and move on here. I think there was a question earlier in chat, and I apologize. I was taking over the screen share directly as that question came in, so I didn't get a chance to answer it. There's a question around whether you can schedule these types of meetings from Outlook as well, because what we're seeing in the real world is that most people don't schedule meetings from Teams, right? That's just the honest reality. Most people still schedule meetings from Outlook. So what we wanted to call out here is that the Teams meeting add-in for Outlook will also support the ability to see those custom meeting templates, and users can create that type of meeting directly from Outlook as well. So there's not necessarily a requirement that you do this from Teams. You can also do this from Outlook as well. All right, next up is branded meetings. Go ahead and jump into this here. So I'll let this slide speak for itself. I think branded meetings is pretty self-explanatory for the most part, but just call out a few things here and the reason why we're kind of adding this feature. So one of the common asks that we hear a lot from customers is the ability to make a meeting feel a little bit more branded and on point to maybe an internal marketing campaign you're doing, or to make people, maybe their external joiners, feel more comfortable and like they're in the right place, or maybe to make them feel that they're attending in a more official presentation delivered, by your organization. So that's exactly what this is, right? What we're allowing you to do here is to upload a brand logo, change the color scheme, the defaults, you can see those here, as well as the background image that's applied in your lobby, which is the screenshot that's shown here, so that when users do join, it feels like a much more customized, branded type of experience rather than just being a generic Teams meeting, right? So you can see that's, the mute, unmute option here, for example, the volume indicator, all the other colors that are normally traditional, Teams purple, right, have been changed. And that's reflected in this lobby experience. You can also see the branding here up as well, right? This is that logo that I mentioned. So if this was a Microsoft event, we'd have our Microsoft logo there, presumably. And then the background image, right? So that's the image that's displayed behind all the different options here as well. So if you're sitting in the lobby, what you'd see is a very custom experience that feels much more branded and on point than the default out of the box. Inside the actual Teams client, once you've joined the meeting, that branded experience carries over. Now, there's no need for us to display the background image at this point, obviously, because now you're actually in the meeting, but you can see that the color scheme that we've defined here carries over into pretty much everything inside the context of that meeting window, as long as you're part of that meeting. So again, just as an example, here I am in my device settings, and you can see that I've got that same color of green that has been determined to be our branding color for this meeting, where normally I would see that traditional Teams purple. Same thing with the active speaker, right? As well as the sort of halo effect around the active speaker here. That's that same color of green. So it carries over pretty much everywhere, again, in the context of that Teams meeting. We also support the mobile experience as well. So if you're joining from a mobile device, the same settings we just talked about also show up in the mobile experience as well. So here's the pre-join screen on a mobile device. You've got that same color. You got that same image here. And then once you've joined, again, same thing, the halo effect around the active speaker, as well as that circle to indicate that they're speaking, again, is that color of green that we've chosen for our meeting. All right, so next up is custom virtual backgrounds. Before I get into custom virtual backgrounds, I think everyone's familiar with virtual backgrounds. We're using virtual backgrounds here today, right? So we've got our HLS Summit backgrounds. But the ask that we heard from a lot of customers is that we allow IT admins specifically to upload a predefined set of virtual backgrounds specifically for their users. So the default out of the box virtual backgrounds are all Microsoft provided, right? And they're great, they do what they're supposed to do, but a lot of times you might want to have a specific set of images that are shown to your users so that you can maybe align for a certain event, or maybe you can have a certain theme for each month. I've seen organizations that have like a different theme for their background images they want to have every single month of the year, right? January, February, March, and so on. And so what this feature does is it actually lets admins upload up to 50 custom virtual backgrounds. Once those backgrounds are uploaded, they can be published to their end users, and end users will see those custom virtual backgrounds show up in their virtual background selector. A couple things to call out here. One, those virtual backgrounds will show up in addition to the Microsoft provided virtual backgrounds that come out of the box. They will be shown at the top, sort of take priority or precedence over those out of the box backgrounds, but you can still see both. The second thing to call out is that the images are shown in the order that they are uploaded. So to go back to my earlier example, if you wanted to do a, I don't know, different background per month, where you'd have 12 different backgrounds, one for each month, and you had one for January and a separate one specifically for February and so on, you want to make sure they're uploaded in that same order. That way they show up to your end users in the order that makes sense, right? So just keep that in mind if you're an IT admin and you're uploading these images yourself. As I said, once you've uploaded those custom images, they do show up in the background settings. Just like you're already familiar with today, there's nothing else the end users have to do. They just simply select which image they'd like to use and move on, right? That also applies to the mobile experience as well. So the same background image selector would apply there, and those custom virtual backgrounds, again, in the order in which they were uploaded, will be shown to users who are using that mobile experience as well. All right, let's talk about custom user policy packages. Before we get into custom policy packages, just a quick recap on what policy packages are. I work very closely with a lot of IT admins, and I can say that some IT admins actually aren't familiar with this, so I wanted to do a 30-second recap real fast. So out of the box, most IT admins will be applying policies, that is a collection of settings, to users through a policy. So they might want to apply a calling policy or a meeting policy or a messaging policy or so on, right? We love our policies. We've got tons of them. You can be very granular in what is shown to your users, what's available to them. But one of the common asks that we heard way back in the day at this point is that we wanted to provide IT admins with a way of providing a set of those policies to users all at once. Maybe you have a certain persona of users that should have a predefined set of policies assigned to them, and you don't want to have to go through and manually assign a calling policy and a meeting policy and a app permission policy and the list goes on and on and on, right? So what we did was we built out-of-the-box policy packages that contained Microsoft's predefined policy settings that you could apply to a group of users, and then they would just naturally get all the different policies that are contained within that policy package. However, we also heard customers say, that's great, but we'd like the ability to upload and manage our own custom policy packages. That is, we want to determine and define what those policy packages actually look like and which settings are included within them. So that's exactly what we're delivering here. This allows you as an IT admin to actually define which settings are included in that policy package, and then actually assign that to whichever users you prefer. So in the Teams Admin Center, which is what you see here today, we would click that add button and we would create a new policy package. So go ahead and virtually do that here. What you can see is the ability to add multiple different types of policies, right? So in the example here, we're adding a meeting policy and a calling policy. That's just two of the many different options. You can add additional policies. You're certainly not required to select a policy for every single option. You could choose to just have a meeting policy and a calling policy as part of this package, or a meeting policy and a calling policy and a messaging policy, or whatever you want, right? And then once you're comfortable with what those policy settings look like, simply click on Save, and then you can assign that to users as you see fit, right? Pretty straightforward. All right, I believe that is the end of my section for now. I'll turn it back over to Abby. I saw a lot of questions come through in chat. I'll try to go through those as well now.
Cool, thank you, Grayson. And yeah, I've answered a fair few of them, but one has just come in, so maybe you'll take that one.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. How's everyone doing? I know we're going through a lot of different features here. Any ones that jump out at you as being interesting? Okay, good. Some thumbs up. Let us know in the comments if there's any that are particularly interesting, or ones that you're sort of more curious about. And of course, all of this is going to be posted onto the HLS blog after this session, so you'll be able to go back and have a look at all of the different things that we've mentioned. Cool. Okay, so now we've been through the first two pillars of Teams Premium. We've been through protected and we've been through personalized or customized, whatever you want to call it. We're now into maybe the smaller section, which is the making meetings more intelligent. And to me, this is a really cool section, and one that I really kind of love to use within Teams. And the first piece that sort of jumps out for the making meetings more intelligent is the live translation for captions. So you may have noticed at the start of this meeting when Sarah went through the housekeeping that there was the option to turn on captions. We've always kind of had the option, or for the majority of time for Teams, we've had the option to turn on captions so that if you can't understand an accent as easily, or you want to, you prefer reading, or maybe you're harder of hearing, you can then look at the captions rather than listening to every word. I know a lot of people sometimes can't understand my funny accents, so I understand that as well. So live translation for captions uses the captions that is following the spoken language, and then we'll translate them to a different language. So for example, let's say there's someone on this meeting who is a native French speaker and prefer to see captions in French. We are able to turn on captions and then change the captions to speak French. So although I'm speaking English, the captions will come out as French. So it's pretty cool. So the way that you turn on live captions is at the start of I think at the start of this we showed this. You click this little more button at the top, the three dots, the ellipsis. Once you click that, you then click language and speech, and then you turn on the live captions. Once you've done that, you'll then get this pop up here, and it will ask you what languages everyone's speaking. You can then choose the language. So there's, I think there's about 40 spoken languages that we support now, or around about that number. You can choose what language is supported. If I click English, you can save it for future meetings so that you don't have to do this every single time you turn on the captions. And then once you do that, we can do the translation. I'll show you that in a second. The list of supported languages, as I also supported spoken languages, as I just mentioned, is around 40. And I can drop all of the different languages that we support into the chat. And the list of supported translation languages is slightly less. I think it's around 25. I'll double check that exact number. It's slightly less than the list of supported spoken languages, but it's still a lot of different languages. So once you've confirmed that everyone is speaking English, you then come into the Teams meeting, and it looks again exactly like the Teams meeting without captions, except at the very bottom you'll see that we have the captions there. It will change per person. So if Grayson started speaking, his name will come up here. If Sarah started speaking, her name would come up here. You then click this little three dots again in the corner of the captions, and you can change the subtitles. So currently they're in English. We can go ahead and change them and translate them to a different language. You can also change the spoken language. So once you set it to one language, so for example, we set this one to English. If Grayson started speaking French, I can then change the spoken language to French, and then the subtitles would follow. So it's pretty cool. It makes us a lot more sort of inclusive with our meetings and when we're speaking to people, from all different kind of backgrounds and countries, and it allows people to have, feel a bit more confident with what they're kind of listening to and understanding. A couple of questions that we always get asked when we talk about captioning and translation and all the rest of it is what data does Teams use to actually create these captions? And this is a thing you may have already heard of called ASR, which is Microsoft Automatic Speech Recognition, and that's a technology service which generates these Teams meeting captions and all the rest of it. From a translation live captions standpoint, we use the Microsoft Speech technology, Microsoft Speech translation technology, which is powered by our cognitive services in Azure, and that translates those live captions. So it's pretty cool. A lot of powerful technology behind behind the translation of captions, even though it seems kind of simple once you're looking at it. So definitely a very useful one for sort of more global organizations. The second piece of the intelligent pillar is intelligent recap, and this has kind of three different areas to it, which I'll cover. The first being the kind of task management side of it, and then also the sort of the searching and the transcription side. So intelligent recap, when turned on, allows for the user to have AI recommended tasks both before, during, and after the meeting. So you can see here, we're in a Teams meeting, but we're in the kind of details part when you click on the Teams meeting. In here, you can have a active agenda. So you can see that I can add something to the agenda. Grayson could go ahead, add something to the agenda, and we can see who has added them. We can also create the meeting notes, which will be uploaded into Loop. And then there can be AI automated or AI recommended tasks for follow-up. So for example, if Sarah comes off mute and says to me, hey, Abby, can you make sure that you post this recording to the HLS blog? After this meeting, if I come into my follow-up tasks, I should see in here Abby to upload the recording. And you can also change who they're assigned to. So, maybe I get assigned a task and I want to delegate it. I can change that in there. What this will also do is it will show up in your tasks app if you want it to. So it's pretty cool. So you can see here that we can accept, we can remove, we can edit, all the rest of it. So that's sort of one side of the intelligent recap. The other part is when we talk about the recordings and the transcription. So with Intelligent Recap, you have the power of AI to essentially make your meetings more productive, more impactful, and make sure that you're getting the most out of these meetings. I'm sure everyone here has an abundance of meetings, or it seems like you're probably taking in a lot of information. You can't remember everything. So being able to have this Intelligent Recap is really cool. So there's a couple of areas within the recording of the Intelligent Recap that we can take advantage of. The first one being screen share events. So you can see here, I'm watching the recording. When you watch the recording, you can see multiple different trackers here. And this specific one is a screen share event. So let's say I attended a meeting and I was kind of multitasking. Not that I ever do that, but like say I'm multitasking and I remembered that there was something important that Grayson shared when he shared his screen. I can go ahead and see, okay, where did Grayson share his screen? Click on that and it will automatically jump me forward to that point. So it's pretty nice to be able to have that option to see, to kind of jump here and there rather than having to watch the whole thing or kind of scrub through to see where it is. You can also see when people have left and joined the meeting. So here I can see that someone has left the meeting, whether it's myself or whoever. All of these things are customized as well to your identity, and I'll show you that in a second. But we can see, when people have left and joined the meeting, we can see name mention events. So if I have been mentioned, again, if Grayson said to me, hey, Abby, can you remember to do X, Y, and Z? I can see on the meeting recording where has my name been mentioned. I can click on that and it will then take me to the exact point where my name has been mentioned, and I can then hear, okay, what was the task I need to do? What was the context to this kind of request? So again, makes it much more efficient when you're in these meetings and watching recordings. Intelligent search with suggested speakers. So on the right hand side with the transcription, you can search for things within the transcription. So again, if you are looking for a specific task or there was context and you kind of forgot the context or you missed it, you can go ahead and search for a keyword or a speaker. So I can research Grayson's name, or I can search premium, and I could find all the information about premium or the times that it was mentioned in this meeting. And this is kind of what it looks like when you do that. Prior to this Intelligent Recap being part of Teams natively, we have had third-party integration. So a lot of organizations or users have used third parties to do this kind of thing, and it's been a massive request for quite a while for this to be included as a native part of Teams experience itself. So we're excited that we've now got this as part of Teams, and it's a really, really cool sort of way to be able to use AI to bring into Teams meetings and kind of make us more efficient. And on that note, speaking of AI, if you want to learn more about AI and how AI is used in Teams meetings and calls, join the session tomorrow at 2 p.m. PST, because we've got some cool info around this area and more for AI. Cool. So that's kind of the small little intelligence pillar. I think I see a lot of questions coming in, so I'll jump into the chat as well, and I'll pass it over to Grayson to cover premium webinar and town halls.
Sounds good. We're making good time here. And yeah, I apologize. I was trying to reply lots of questions on this section, a lot of them around who needs to have licensing and timelines for rollout. So maybe take a look at those. I did the best I could, but I think I got a little bit behind.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about webinar enhancements, specifically advanced event management. And actually, a lot of the features that we're talking about here today are being used for this session that we're delivering to you today. So this is a great example of using some of those in the real world. So I'll go ahead and jump into the first one here, which are a whole slew of webinar enhancements. This slide covers the registration enhancements in particular. So let's just go through those one at a time. I think everybody's familiar with what webinars are in general. If you're not, it's really a Teams meeting under the hood that has a registration component tied to it. So historically, you've had some limitations on the features that could be enabled within that registration kind of functionality. And so we're adding those as part of our premium SKU here. So again, just going through these one at a time, we are adding the ability to support registration limits over 1,000. Today, webinars support registration capacity maximums, but you can only go up to 1,000. So you could say, we only want 500 to be registered, but you can't go over 1,000. And the reality is that a significant portion of people who register for an event are unlikely to attend. So if you wanted to say, I don't know, hopefully have 800 people show up to your webinar, you probably wouldn't want to limit it to 800. You might want to limit it to 2,000 or 3,000, right? I think we had almost 400 people register for this event here today, and we have about 125 that showed up, right? And that's normal, right? There's nothing wrong with it. That's just the reality. So what we're allowing you to do here is to set that capacity much higher. You can actually set it up to 20,000 initially for your registration capacity. And then you'll be able to have up to 20,000, again, theoretically, register for your events. We're also adding a manual approval feature. So if you wanted, you could specify that people have to be manually approved before they're able to receive the invite link and attend the webinar. The common use case I hear here in the healthcare vertical is often around like a pharmaceutical organization that might be delivering an external session on a new drug or technology that they've invented. And they're worried or concerned that maybe a competitor, for example, might get their hands on the registration link and register. And then, of course, after that registration is done, the system automatically generates a link to the webinar and sends it to that person. And with hundreds, perhaps thousands of people registering, it can be very difficult to kind of comb through the data to see who registered. And by the time you do that, it's too late because that person already has their hands on that link. And it's difficult to manage who's who and ensure that only the right people are actually attending that meeting after the event's already started. So what this lets you do is basically creates a manual approval workflow. So you can manually review who has registered. And then if you're okay with them attending your session, then you can manually either approve them individually or approve everyone that has registered all at once. So that lets you be a lot more granular with who actually gets their hands on the attendee link for the webinar itself. We're also adding a feature we call waitlist. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's in the name, right? Basically, it lets users put themselves on a waitlist in case the webinar is at registration capacity. So if you've defined your capacity limit to be 1,000, just again, for example, and you've had 1,000 people register, historically, they wouldn't be able to register at all, right? But with the waitlist feature, you can actually allow them to put themselves on a waitlist. And if people cancel their previous spots, then we can notify the user and then they can register afterwards, taking up that spot that has now become available. Last but not least is the option to limit registration date and time. So if you wanted, you can set up a list of dates. So let me grab my laser pointer again. In the example here, we're limiting our registration between these two dates and times. So if I receive the registration link before this first date, I won't be able to register. It'll tell me I have to come back later. And if I attempt to register after the latter date, then it'll tell me registration has already closed. So if you want to be very selective in terms of when people can register for an event, then that feature lets you do exactly that. All right, next up is some enhancements we're making to the email functionality of the webinar registration process. So there are a lot of different emails that will be generated and automatically sent throughout the different kind of workflow that's associated with registering for and attending an event. For example, when I first register for an event, then there's a confirmation that's sent and there's a link that's sent to me that lets me join the meeting, the webinar, whenever the time is ready for that webinar to happen. There's also a cancellation link or email that's sent. There are confirmations that are sent if people update their registration. There are thank you emails that can be sent after the fact. You can set up no-show emails so people can watch the recording after the event is over if they don't show up, right? All that stuff exists and can be set up today, but what we're letting you do here is actually edit the look and feel of those emails from within the context of the Teams client itself, right? So the person who's organizing this can actually change those emails and choose whether or not they're going to be sent, first off, but also change the verbiage or the wording of each of those emails so they can get it a little bit more customized based on what they want to actually share with the end users. So our next slide here will show what that looks like. This is the example confirmation email. Again, you can edit those emails that we just talked about, but in this context, we're just using this registration confirmation email as an example. So you can see this is a very basic rich text editor that lets you change the wording, update what's actually included inside that email. We also use variables here. They're only available to, and they only show up to the organizer, the person who's actually modifying this, but they're there to help them determine which texts are dynamically generated versus which will be included for everyone who attends no matter what. So for example, a person's name, the person who registers, that's a dynamic variable, right? My name's Grayson, so when I register and I type in my name, the confirmation of the email sent to me is going to say, "Hi, Grayson." But if Abby attends and she types in Abby, then of course it's going to say, "Hi, Abby," and not "Hi, Grayson," right? So that's just one example. So you can see here, this is kind of a variable indicator, just showing that you don't need to be modifying that. That's a variable that will be changed depending on the context of the email, right? Just something to help the organizer as they're modifying this workflow. One small caveat on these two slides that we just showed you here, the screenshots that we showed are early screenshots. Our final product truth might look a little bit different, but the overall functionality will be much the same. All right, so let's talk about masked attendees. This one is one I'm really excited about. Let me describe the use case before I get into the feature. This is one I come across quite a bit working the healthcare vertical. We pushed really hard for this feature to be made available, and I'm super excited that it's about to release. The context of the use case that I often hear as I'm talking with my customers is you might have a certain type of meeting. Perhaps it's a class on weight loss or a diabetes management course, or it could be what to expect when you're expecting, right? Any type of event where you might want to ensure that there's some additional privacy between the attendees, where attendees maybe don't want their identities to be exposed to other attendees. Today, as you know, when you attend an event, your identity, that is your name that's associated with your accounts in the actual event, is shown to others. And so just to go back to that weight loss example, right? Maybe I'm attending a weight loss seminar and I really just don't want to have my name shown to other people who are also attending that seminar. We simply don't have a way of doing that in Teams today historically, right? So what we're doing is we're actually allowing you to set up a meeting option here in the Teams client such that attendees are masked from each other. And I use the word attendees and kind of hung on that word for just a moment very intentionally, because it's very important if you use this feature that you properly define who your attendees are. Attendee in this context literally means the attendee experience in the Teams client. It means that the organizer has properly defined who is an attendee, who's a presenter, and who's a co-organizer, right? So attendees in that context can see the name of the organizer, the co-organizers, and the presenters, but they cannot see the names of any other attendees, right? So what you see in this screenshot here is the attendee experience. What I'm seeing is Daniela. Daniela is the organizer, so of course I can see her information. I can see her name, but the other attendees, as you can see here, are masked to me. I cannot see their identities. So I can attend this session and I can still interact with people and I can consume the content, but I'm not able to see the identities of other attendees, and they can't see my identity either. So I can attend feeling safe and comfortable that my identity and my privacy is being protected in this meeting. The next thing to mention here, though, just very quickly, is on the reverse, right? This is a screenshot showing the perspective of a presenter or an organizer or a co-organizer, all three of those roles. Those users can see the identities of everyone in the meeting, including the attendees. We made that decision intentionally because typically the context here is that the organizer, co-organizer, presenters, whoever, still need to understand their audience, whatever they're presenting or the content they're delivering, typically needs to be tailored to their audience. And so they need to understand who they're presenting to, right? So what you see here is, again, that perspective of someone in that leadership position within the meeting. And they can see people who are attending, right? They can also, of course, see the identities of other presenters and attendees, and co-organizers. One thing I will say on this topic is that there's a degree of accountability for presenters and co-organizers to maintain the privacy of attendees, right? Because I can see this information, it is possible that I could accidentally or intentionally share it with the audience if I chose, right? So as an example, if I'm sharing my screen, maybe I've got a, I don't know, document I'm sharing, or maybe I'm playing a video and I'm sharing my screen in order to do that. I could accidentally bring my Teams meeting window on top of that screen share and inadvertently expose the data of others who are attending simply because I'm showing them my view, right? I have access to this data and I'm maybe accidentally sharing it with them through that screen share. So it is important that presenters or co-organizers take that responsibility seriously and just be careful about what they share in terms of screen share. Also, they could accidentally or intentionally verbally mention someone by name. The example I usually use here is if someone asks a question in chat, right? If I'm reading through the meeting chats and, I don't know, Bob asks a question, it's likely that I might read that question out loud and then use Bob's name in my reply just to indicate to Bob that I understand, that Bob asked the question and I'm replying to that specific question. In this context, you wouldn't want to do that, right? Because you don't want to expose Bob's identity to everyone else. We don't want to know that Bob asked that question in chat. So it's, again, up to me to not mention Bob's name when I reply to that question, or if I'm referring to anyone in particular inside the meeting itself. One thing we've done to try to help presenters and co-organizers with that is we've chosen to show the word attendee before the person's name in the session, even to the presenters and co-organizers. So again, what you see here is the co-organizer presenter view. So I can see attendees and their names, but I see the word attendee first. We did that on purpose because we think it's less likely that someone will accidentally use the name of someone if they have to first read the word attendee before that person's actual name. That's just kind of a mental reminder, hey, this person's identity is masked, they're an attendee, you need to be respectful of that and be careful, right? We believe we've covered pretty much all the surfaces where the IDs of the individuals are captured. So you can see that here in this main meeting stage view, but also in the chat as well. So if a attendee chooses to use chat, they're absolutely welcome to do so, and their identity will be masked there as well. So this is the view that both attendees and co-organizers and presenters would see. I as a presenter can see Daniela. Again, that's our organizer here. So obviously her her identity is not masked, but another attendee asking a question here has their identity protected. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Green Room. Green Room is another pretty fun feature. We actually use Green Room for this session here today. So when you join the session, if you happen to join before the actual session started, you may have noticed a sort of different lobby view that told you the meeting hadn't yet started. I'll talk about that here in a second, and I'll show you what that screenshot looks like. So no worries if you joined a little bit late and didn't see it. But essentially the idea here is when you're delivering a session where you expect to have a large audience and maybe you have multiple people that are collaborating on that session to make sure that the content is prepared and you have your ducks in a row and all that, you typically join before the session actually starts, right? So for us, for example, we all joined 10 to 15 minutes early, and we just made sure that we were all comfortable with the content. We knew who was speaking and in what order, and that we had the proper virtual background set up, right, to align with each other. And we did that all privately in our green room, right? So the green room is a private space where the production team, people who are working on producing that event, can actually go if they join prior to the meeting actually starting. Whereas any attendees, if they join prior to the event starting, will see a message that just says, "Hey, the event hasn't yet started. Don't worry, we'll get going here soon." So what you see in this screenshot here is the producer or presenter's view. So this is what we saw when we joined prior to this session actually starting. This is our own private little meeting. We can talk freely to our heart's content without having to worry about that content being shared with the larger audience, people who are waiting for us to start. When we're ready to share, we can go ahead and click on Start Meeting, and that essentially goes live, if you will. It pulls the curtain to the side, and whatever we're sharing at that moment in time is then live. So that lets us be prepared and hopefully be a little bit more professional once we get things kicked off. A couple things to mention here. One, people who are waiting in the lobby can use the chat option and can also use the Q&A option. So if they have questions or if they want to put a message in chat, maybe they're asking if they're in the right place, then they can do that, right? Even before the session has started. And we, on the back end, people who are in that green room waiting for them, can respond in kind, right? So if we want to answer their question using the Q&A app, or if the question or comment was in the chat, we can see and do that without any issues. This is the attendee experience. Like I said, some of you probably saw this already today, but if you joined a little bit later, no worries. This is what it looks like. While the green room is active, attendees only see this canvas. Again, it just calls out the event title. That's to let them know that they're in the right place, they're attending the right session, and it just lets them know that things will start shortly, right? While they're in this location, they cannot turn on their audio or video. I already said, I think chat and Q&A are available, but this is a very limited experience by design, right? Just to let people wait until the event is actually ready to start. All right, let's talk about manage mode. All right, manage mode is another interesting feature designed for event teams. Essentially, this lets presenters and organizers control who shows up on the stage. That is, what content is visible to the attendees. Today, without this feature, attendees basically see on stage the video of everyone who has their camera enabled. So right now, for example, you see Abby's video and you see myself, right? I think that's everyone with video enabled right now. But with this feature, presenters, people who are managing this session actually can select exactly who is on stage. So even if Abby and I both have our video enabled, we could choose to have only my video shared at this moment in time, for example, since I'm the one that's actively presenting. So that's something that an events team could manage behind the scenes. Maybe Abby and I are both presenters, but we've got, I don't know, Sarah and Jonathan, the rest of the team, kind of running things behind the scenes, right? Ensuring that the right person's video is shown at the right time, the right content is shared, and so on. One use case I often throw out here is like fireside chats, right? Like maybe you have an internal all hands where you're doing like a fireside chat with your CEO, something like that, right? And they're having a back and forth with the CIO, I don't know, right? You might want to ensure that while the CEO is speaking, his or her video is sort of prioritized in full screen and no one else's video is shown. And then maybe the CIO has a comment or response to that. You could then flip and the CIO's video would be shown full screen, whereas the CEO's video would not, right? So it lets you have a lot more granular control over what's actually shown on the stage, so you can present a more formal kind of professional back and forth. Other things to mention here is that you can do the same not only for video, but for shared content as well. You can do both. You can have somebody's video enabled as well as shared content. So right now we're sharing a PowerPoint live deck with you, and I'm sharing video. So we could choose to have both of those types of media being presented to you, or we could choose to have just one, right? So if I chose, I could say, I want to leave my video enabled. This screenshot shows what that would look like, but only the content that I'm sharing actually shows up for users. I'll go back one slide just to highlight one more thing before I move on here. On the top left of your section, this is where you actually manage who is on stage. That's what the verbiage we use there to describe who's being seen by everyone else. If you want to bring them onto the screen, bring them onto the stage, all you have to do is click on the three dots next to them, the ellipsis, and you click bring on screen, and that will result in that person being shown to everyone else on stage, right? Same thing in reverse, take them off the screen, and it will remove them from the main stage. All right, I know we're moving quickly here. We've actually got, I think, plenty of time to cover the rest of the stuff, but I just want to pause for a second. Are we doing okay on questions, Abby? Anything I need to answer? Are you able to keep up with it?
Nope, I think there's been a lot of questions, but generally all okay.
Okay, great. All right, in that case, I will go ahead and move on then. We'll talk about virtual appointments. Virtual appointments is another pretty cool use case that I see a lot in the healthcare vertical. Before we talk about virtual appointments, some background on where virtual appointments kind of came from or was born from, right? If you're familiar with bookings, then a lot of what you see inside virtual appointments will be familiar, right? Bookings essentially is the ability to create a shared calendar that has typically multiple people supporting that workflow or that business, we call it. And then traditionally with bookings, you would create a typically public facing, could be internal as well, web page that would have options for people to schedule appointments with that team on their own time. So I could choose to have a virtual or in-person sales consultation with the sales team at 3 p.m. my time, right? And it'll present options based on availability of the team, and I can just schedule that workflow myself. Virtual appointments is built on the back of bookings, so it lets you bring in any bookings, calendars, or schedules you've created already, but it takes it quite a bit further in a few key different ways. And a lot of those are built into the premium SKU that we'll talk about here today. Typically, virtual appointments, which is, as you can see it here, an app inside the Teams clients, allows for end-to-end business to consumer or business to customer engagements. That's not necessarily required, but most common use cases will be you create a virtual appointments page or a bookings page, and then the use case is typically for your patients or your customers or whatever, as the case may be. It's typically someone outside your organization, right? So what you can see here is the virtual appointments app. There's a few tabs that we'll go over here at the top. You've got your home tab, which just shows you your booking schedule. You've got a queue view, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But generally, this is kind of your starting point, your homepage into managing your virtual appointments or managing your scheduling system or whatever it is that you're operating outside of virtual appointments, all in one location. So the first thing that you can do inside the virtual appointments app, which differs just a little bit from bookings, is you can proactively create a booking on someone else's behalf. Let's say you're a healthcare provider and you are working at the front desk, right? And someone physically walks in and talks to you and says, I'd like to set a virtual appointment. I'd like to speak with my care provider 3 p.m. on Tuesday. Can you please set up an invite and send it to my email address? And they provide their email address to you. This would allow you to do that from inside virtual appointments, right? So you can just go into virtual appointments and you can go ahead and enter the information of that patient, right? You can see that here. And then you can add the provider here and send that, right? And you're done, right? This lets you see the availability of the provider so you can make sure it works for them. And it also lets you send text messages to that client before the visit. So that will result in them receiving an SMS message reminding them of their upcoming appointments and giving them a unique link they can tap to join that virtual appointments on their device. The virtual appointment itself is a little bit different than a traditional Teams meeting. We'll show you what that experience looks like here in a bit, but rest assured that we're not sending them a traditional normal Teams link that requires that they download the client or sign into a Microsoft account or anything like that. We've tried to make it very seamless and easy to use. The other premium feature to talk about here inside virtual appointments is the queue view. So the queue view is brand new. This is your kind of one-stop shop to viewing the status of your upcoming and historical virtual appointments that you've delivered, right? So a couple examples to walk through here. You can see we've got a virtual appointment that's in the waiting stage. That simply means that the person, the client or the patient has joined and they're waiting. They're waiting for the appointment to begin. So they're there, and that might help you as a coordinator make sure that they feel welcome, that they're in the right place. You can do that through sending them a message using our two-way lobby chat feature, which is also part of this premium SKU. So if, let's say, someone is waiting in a virtual space for their appointment to begin, you might want to reach out to them to let them know they're in the right place. Maybe their practitioner is running a little bit behind. You could tell them, hey, you're in the right place, don't worry. We'll be with you in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, right? And they can actually reply from their side as well, which we'll show here in a minute. So that's a really cool feature that we built into this platform here. You can also see if the appointment has started. So here you go. This is just showing that that appointment has already begun. You can see if a particular appointment was a no-show, or if the appointment is currently supposed to be ongoing, but it's not because people are late to the appointment, or if it was properly completed with no issues, right? So all that information is available to you in real time in this queue view here. You can also set up on-demand meetings from a bookings page as well, if you like. We won't spend too much time on this, but just know that's also part of virtual appointments. Customers can do an on-demand appointment in that branded web page. This looks a lot like bookings, again, because it's really built on the backs of bookings. So just keep that in mind as well. Like I said, we will send an SMS reminder to that end user. If you opt them in to do so, there's a little confirmation box that basically says, yes, you want to send an SMS reminder to that person. And so if you do that, like I said, we'll send them a reminder letting them know their upcoming appointments requires their attention in the near future, right? Part of that SMS includes a link to join their actual event. So if I, as a patient or an end user, tap on that, what happens is my mobile device, presumably this is a mobile device because it's an SMS message, will open in my web browser, and I'll be prompted to enter my name. That's it. There's no other prompt to download. There's no authentication required here. This virtual visit or virtual consultation or whatever it is will be delivered 100% in my browser. I don't have to worry about anything else. The only thing we ask of those end users is that they enter their name there and then click on get started and they're done, right? Very simplified, easy to use experience for those users. Once they actually do join the meeting, this is basically what it looks like, right? A couple of things to point out here. So one, you can see there is a lobby feature, just like in a regular Teams meeting. You can see that reflected in this slide right here. So when the user has joined, maybe they join 5 minutes early, or maybe they join on time and the person they're supposed to meet with is late. They go into that sort of lobby section there, and it just lets them know that the meeting or on-demand visit or whatever the case may be will start soon. No worries, you're in the right place. Sit tight, right? And again, as I said earlier, if the organizer or the scheduler, the person who's managing this kind of business wants to, they can also use that queue view to see that, hey, I'm now waiting in this lobby, and they can send me a message. So it might be a little bit hard to see here, but in the top of this section, you can actually see an incoming message to this user that actually shows them that data, that text that was entered by the scheduler, the person who sent that from that queues view that we showed you earlier. And if I tap on that as an end user in this browser experience, I can then type a quick reply to that scheduler and say whatever I want to say there. All right, we are nearing the end here. We've got about 4 or 5 more slides to go through. This is an additional feature that comes with virtual appointments. That's some analytics that allow you to have a lot more data and insight into usage trends of the virtual appointments app. So you can see things like no-shows, the effectiveness of SMS reminders, the number of successfully completed meetings, survey responses if you're sending those. All that information is available inside the virtual appointments app. It's also available to IT admins, just so you know. So if you're an IT admin, rest assured you get access to the same information. But the idea here is that you want to make this available to your business leaders or the people who are actually running this particular business out in the real world as well, right? And they can use this data to improve on whatever they're trying to lead. This is what the IT admin's virtual appointments view looks like. So we have a new virtual appointments usage report that's available here to IT admins. They can view detailed activity for any virtual appointments that are created or conducted through actually multiple scheduling points. You get access to information on the effectiveness of some of those capabilities we've talked about in Teams Premium, like SMS, the waiting room chat, queuing, all that fun stuff, right? You could also export that into Excel if you want to analyze it in other platforms, right? Last up is the virtual appointments template. So this is shifting gears a little bit. It's included in the virtual appointments section just because it has the same name. But essentially what this is the same type of meeting that we just talked about, right? The typically business to consumer or business to customer type of meeting where you don't want to have that person be prompted to download the Teams client or authenticate. We're adding that type of meeting to your Teams calendar as well. So you'll notice here, we're no longer in that virtual appointments app. We're actually in our Teams calendar here. And what we're doing is we're selecting the virtual appointments type of meeting. And what that does is it actually allows us to have a very similar scheduling experience from what we just showed you inside the virtual appointments app, but from inside the calendar as well. So here we can add the external guest name and their email address, and then send this out to them. And once that happens, they will receive that same meeting link that we showed you earlier in the text format, but in this case, it would be sent through an email. And when they click on that email link, they'll join in their browser. Again, no prompt to download Teams, no authentication required. This works on both a mobile device as well as a desktop device, as long as you have a supported browser. So no matter what, you can get access to that kind of quick and easy, hopefully painless join experience, whether your organizer was scheduling from the calendar itself or from the virtual appointments app. All right, I know that was a lot to cover, and one of the questions we often get at this point is, do you have any sort of breakdown, especially for virtual appointments, into what is available to everyone, any subscribers to just generic Microsoft, licensing for Teams versus what is specific to Premium. So we'll just pause here for a second to let you sort of digest this slide. This is our best effort at trying to show you what's included in Premium versus what's available to anyone with regular Teams licensing. All right, and that is really the end of our presentation for you today. We're doing great on time. Are there any other questions that we maybe haven't got to in the chat so far?
think we've got to the majority. I was just going to drop into the chat as well a couple of links which show, one of them has a graph which shows what's available in Teams and what's available with Teams Premiums, just so you can see the differences. So I'll drop that into the chat now so that you have that available. The one that I haven't got to yet, Grayson, is someone has asked if with the virtual appointments and the reports that are created, is there the availability to export those reports like on a recurring automation? And I don't think that is native, but you can you could create automate that through the sort of reporting capabilities that we have.
Yep, that's correct. I believe. Yeah, I don't know of any way to do that, through an automated reports. But you could manually export it and then perform automation based on the Excel file. But it would have to be originally manually exported.
And then another question has asked what hasn't been released yet and what has. I'll drop a link into the chat which will show you to the M365 roadmap, and it will tell you pretty much everything that has been already shipped and then what's still to come.
Excellent. I think we have one hand raised, actually. Is that indicating we have one extra question? Did we miss something?
Yeah, we may. If you wouldn't mind putting your question in the chat, since we've disabled audio, that would be great. We'll make sure to address it. Well, great. Abby, Grayson, this was a great presentation. Hopefully everyone online agrees with me. If you would love to see some reactions. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I know it was a long session, but we have a lot of great new features coming out in the new Teams Premium SKU. So one quick reminder, if you have a couple minutes today, Jonathan Wynn's actually going to be posting it in the chat. We would love to get your feedback on today's session. We will be giving out some prizes based off of your feedback, but this really helps us determine, what would you like to see in the next Team Summit. This is actually brought by the Health and Life Science Group. So it's myself and Jonathan Wynn and Jonathan Danowitz. So it's us three that are creating this content and getting these great speakers to come on board. So if there's something you would love to see in the future, let us know. Also, this is only day 3. We still have 2 more days left. We actually have a session later on this afternoon that is focused on Viva licensing, what's part of the seated versus premium. Feel free to register if you like. Those links are posted here on the PowerPoint. And lastly, if you would like to stay in contact with us and hear more about the events that we're doing, please join us. We actually have a Viva Engage community called the Health and Life Science Community Connection, and it's open to all. So if you are not part of the Health and Life Science group, no worry, feel free to still join. We do meet on a monthly basis, the 3rd Thursday of every month for 30 minutes, and we bring to you quick content that's focused on Microsoft Teams and Viva. So feel free to sign up and we'll make sure to keep you in our communication moving forward. And lastly, just note, as we mentioned at the beginning of the session and throughout, this recording and also Abby and Grayson's presentation will be uploaded on the Health and Life Science blog. We will get that posted later on today, so please be patient with us. We have one more session, but we'll make sure to get it updated today. And we will also send out an email just so you can have that quick link. With that, we'll kind of give everyone back some time. So thank you guys so much again, and we hope to see you for the rest of our sessions later on this week. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you a little later.